My name is Aldo Fiordelli, and I'm a journalist, and I write for Corriere della Sera and The Canter. And I'm very happy to be here because even if I've been living in the Lombardy region for so many years now. I was born in Tuscany, and therefore Chianti Classico is one of the wines that I've been growing with. And so therefore Chianti Classico is Senese and Florentine, and therefore a couple of housekeeping information. And on your table, you should have information regarding the consortium, and on the table mat you have a QR code through which you can read the information with regard to the wines we are about to taste. So now we are going to start the tasting session. So we have 11 wines to taste, so we have to keep the right pace. And what is beautiful today, after so many years of discussion, we can hear, we can taste separately the so-called UGA of Chianti Classico. So the additional areas regarding Chianti Classico. Geographical areas. So to discover what these UGAs are, geographical areas, we need to make an introduction with regard to the denomination of Chianti Classico. So the region, the area is at the center of the Tuscany region, Siena and Florence, and we are talking about an 80-kilometer long region. So this is the territory of Chianti Classico, very similar to the Bordeaux area. So this is a large area. And in hectares, we are talking about 74,400 hectares. And here, this is the first figure that I would like to share with you today. And this is the thing that in these 74,400 hectares of territory, 6,800, and this is an updated figure, are those cultivated with vines. So less than 10% of the entire Chianti Classico area is covered with vineyards. So what is the result of this? The fact is that this territory is has a very rich biodiversity. So this is not only so if we think of the Langhe region, we know that We know that very clear. So we do not only have cultivations only focused on vines, because this would result in an impoverishment of the territory. So olive trees, for example, are very important also for the Tuscany region, and the woods would be missing. But all this is present in the Chianti Classico area. So we have thousands of hectares of woods, of olive trees, and the pure olive oil of Chianti Classico area is one of the excellencies of the Tuscany region. So we have this element of biodiversity. And what does this mean for the wine complexity? And Chianti Classico is a territory where plants flourish in every season. And the blossoming of and the richness of biodiversity, well, this is also very much important to fight against the diseases, because this also promotes a reduction in competition between winemakers. So the composition, and this is one of the elements which is interesting to note, is that this region is very much at the center of the Tuscany region. And the Chianti Classico area is slightly more continental as compared to other denominations of the Tuscany region. So, what does it mean that it is slightly more continental? You know that Italy has a mainly continental climate, and even more so the Tuscany region. This means that winters are not so rigid and summers are not so hot, because we have the influence of the sea to mitigate the climate. And with regard to the Chianti Classico area, this Mediterranean climate is less than other areas like Bolgheri or Montalcino, which is 50 kilometers from the seaside, where, of course, the influence of the Mediterranean Sea is stronger. This means that the acidity of the acidic level of the Chianti Classico is higher compared to other Sangiovese wine. You know that Sangiovese vine variety is one of the most important in this area. And what is fortunately even more austere here, and we will see this in the wines that we're going to taste, in the past with the climate change, well, this becomes even more important, having a more continental climate, cooler, and with the acidity which is a little bit higher. So let's start going into details with regard to the denomination and with regard to the topic of today, so the geographical areas. Let's see the differences in the map. So starting from a climate perspective, before entering specifics with regard to the terroirs, so let me go back to make it clearer. So as you can see, the Chianti Classico area is covers a very important area from south to west, south to north, and west to east. In the north, cooler wines, and in the south, closer to Siena with warmer wines. And these are the UGAs, meaning the geographical areas highlighted. These are not all municipalities, obviously, Castelnuovo Beralderga and Greve, but for example, Lamole Panzano, Montefiorale are just villages belonging to municipalities. And the breakdown has been made from a geological perspective to distinguish the different areas of Chianti Classico. So now we're going to go into specifics while we are tasting the wines. So years ago, Nicholas Belfridge wrote a book making a distinction between the Chianti Classico wines, and he said that that all was influenced by the exposure of the vines and the altitude of the vines. So therefore, with regard, this is a distinction that is used also for the additional geographical units, UGAs. And the particular thing about the Chianti Classico is given by a common element, which is the vine variety Sangiovese, which which comes as a majority, and that is, in fact, all except one wine we are going to taste today. All the others are 100% Sangiovese. Normally, 80% in main wines and 90% for the selection wines. And the great selection, 90% Sangiovese, and the remaining 10%. Local vines. So here we have a sample with a small percentage of Merlot. And with regard to history, well, let's say that the international vine varieties that have been cultivated here in this area, and well, here as a matter of fact, we have the Super Tuscan and Vigorello Sanfelice, Tiglianelli Vantinori, I believe you know of these names. And all these vine varieties are wines that are influenced by the Chianti Classico. So the Merlot Chiantigiano come with a personality that is very much in line with the Chianti Classico. So what does it mean? It means that, this is something we've seen before, so dry character, red fruits, and tannins, present, mature, but with a texture, chalky texture. And here, so the concept I was referring to before. So here we have the elements regarding biodiversity. So Sangiovese here, and the pyramid of the quality pyramid of Chianti Classico, where well, let's say 10 years ago, we had the Gran Selezione, so the Grand Selection with the excellencies. So we have Chianti Classico Annata, the Chianti Classico Riserva, with 24 months in wood and 3 years in bottles, and the Grand Selezione with 30 months aging and 3 years in bottles. So here you see also the technical characteristics. So the alcohol level, no, there is also the alcohol level, 12%. But I believe that today we have the opposite problem. But in any case, starting what we were saying at the beginning, in a more continental climate, Chianti Classico, also an increase in the alcohol content is not as extreme as in other areas of the Tuscany region, as this is becoming a problem lately. So 38 million bottles per year. 485 members and 342 bottlers, and this makes it clear how much quality we have in this denomination in terms of quality and selection. So the Gran Selezione, as you can see, is very young, so it represents just a small part of the denomination for two reasons. The first, because it represents the real excellence of the denomination, and secondly, because the number of the producers is very high indeed, but it's still lower than the overall potential because this is a change in these specifications which is still very recent. So, thank you, and let's continue with the tasting of the wines, and I leave you with this slide so that you can see the different additional geographical units. So with this tasting session and including with the sub-zones, we are going through different years. So a couple of...
Now let's talk about the various vintages, 2018, 2019. 2019 was a very balanced vintage, very interesting. One of the best vintages, 2018, was thinner, not fresher, but it was less rainy. So it's one of the thinnest or most subtle vintages. We don't have 2017, as far as I remember, which was rather dry and warm. And now let's go back to 2016. That was the best vintage for the past 10 years. Now we have a sample of 2015, which was a very good vintage, but also powerful. And so 2020 is not available yet, and going backwards would not enable us to compare the identity of the various zones. Any questions? Please feel free and raise your hand if you have any questions. So the decision, why was the decision to use only 100% Sangiovese wines? Well, because most of the Gran Selezione today are 100% Sangiovese. It is a decision based on identity and quality. Identity, because Sangiovese is the most representative grape variety of the denomination, and quality, because we select the best of the most important grape. There are some Gran Selezione wines that are made with a blend of grapes, especially local grapes, Canaiolo and Colorino. And they are incredible additions to Sangiovese. I don't want to say that Sangiovese is the only quality grape. You can make a lot of quality with these contributions, but in terms of color and structure for Colorino, and perfumes and drinkability for Canaiolo. 10% is a very small contribution anyway. Is there a question from here?
Allora, qui si entra un po' nel politico diplomatico, è stata una scelta
Okay, the
ministeriale che io
decision of
sappia e se non sbaglio
UGA
una
of the
modifica
additional
ha
geographical units
proprio
was a
la,
decision
la
taken by the
domanda di queste
ministry
sottozone dell'ultimo
because
minuto e
these
credo che
subzones
diciamo dal
requested
nostro
it,
punto di vista si
and as
possano
far as we are
considerare
concerned,
assolutamente identiche,
they can be
MGA e
considered as
UGA.
identical
La menzione ha
MGA and
forse
UGA.
sempre dal punto di
MGA,
vista
which is
geografico, forse
additional
un'accezione
geographical indication,
più specifica
is
e
probably more
dettaglio, no?
specific and gives
Le
more
UGA hanno una
detail.
dimensione mediamente più grande
UGA,
rispetto a
additional geographical
quella
unit,
zone
is generally
a cui può
speaking
arrivare la
wider
menzione
than
dell'Anger.
the indication which is present in the Lange region.
Allora, cominciamo
Let's start
dalla fattoria di Luiano.
with Fattoria di
Siamo a
Loiano.
San Casciano,
We
quindi
are in San
cominciamo
Casciano.
da uno dei comuni
So we
fiorentini
start with
nel
one of the
nord-ovest
municipalities
della
near Florence,
denominazione.
northwest
Qui
of the
siamo sulla sinistra
denomination.
della Greve, ora in
We
realtà
are on the left of
diciamo, grafico
Greve.
qui non si vede
In
il
this
fiume Greve, molto
diagram, you don't
importante
see
perché
the Greve
disegna proprio
River,
buona
which
parte
is very
della
important because
denominazione dei suoi confini. Siamo sulla
it
riva sinistra della Greve
defines
che
the
va
boundaries of the denomination.
praticamente
We
da
are on
Greve
the
in
left
Chianti
bank of Greve,
verso
from Greve in
Firenze, quindi in
Chianti to
direzione
Florence,
nord-ovest.
so heading
E la
northwest.
particolarità della zona di San Casciano è di avere
And the
dei
specific
terreni
feature of San
più
Casciano is
alluvionali,
that it
dei
has
depositi più
more
alluvionali, quindi
flooded
terreni
soils,
tendenzialmente più leggeri,
lighter
con
soils,
delle argille più leggeri per
with lighter
presenza di
clays
limo e di sabbia.
and more
Questo
sand.
tende a rendere i vini sempre
This,
freschi, perché
this
tra
makes
l'altro è una zona
wines fresh
tra le più piovose
because this is
della
one
denominazione,
of
ma
the most
anche
rainy
più
areas in the
freschi e anche
denomination, so fresher
più
wines,
approcciabili.
but also more approachable wines.
Siamo nel 2018, quindi come dicevo
So this
vale
is
annate
2018.
tendenzialmente più fresche.
So this is a fresh vintage.
Sentite c'è subito un bel sentore di ciliegia, che è
You
quello più
feel
tipico del
cherry,
Sangiovese, una ciliegia
hues,
fresca,
fresh
un'aroma
cherry,
dolce,
very
la
typical of Sangiovese,
un
violet,
po' di
Parma
pecorino.
violet, some black pepper.
Bocca,
On the
il vino è
palate,
secco,
the wine is dry.
torna questa sensazione di ciliegia,
Again,
torna la
the
sensazione
cherry
florale.
note and the
Questi sono due
flowering
elementi
note.
distintivi,
This is one of
a mio
the
avviso,
hallmarks, in my
del Chianti
opinion, of
classico
Chianti
e in
Classico,
particolare
and
del Sangiovese,
specifically
in particolare
of
del Sangiovese del
Sangiovese
Chianti
and
classico, cioè
Sangiovese in
il
Chianti
floreale
Classico.
non è soltanto
So
un
these
elemento
flowering notes
di aroma, è proprio un
are not
elemento
simply
distintivo
part of
e
the
torna
aroma,
questa
but they're also
sensazione di
part of
rose e viola
taste. Again,
sul
rose
palato.
and violet on the
È un
palate.
vino che nonostante i 14 gradi non è del tutto
14
pieno, ci
degrees of
lascia questa
alcohol, but it's
sensazione
not
un po'
full-bodied.
dritta nel palato,
It
che
is
è
rather straight
tipica della
on the
zona,
palate, which is typical of this
e
area.
il tannino
And
è
the tannins
secondo
are
all'inizio,
silky
questo
in the beginning.
probabilmente grazie anche al
This is
contributo del
probably because
15% di
of a 10-15% addition of Merlot,
però in bocca
but
è
on the
molto
palate
succoso,
it's very
molto
juicy
gustoso e ha questa
and
sensazione
it
gessosa
gives
solo
this
nel finale.
chalky finish.
L'81, questa gran selezione della famiglia
81,
Palombo,
this is Gran Selezione from the Palombo
come
winery.
dicevamo, è fatto in maniera molto classica con
It has a very classical style.
circa 20, qui ho riportato la scheda, 20 dovrebbero essere
In the
27
technical
mesi di
sheet
botte,
says
non
27 months in oak
30,
in barrel, not
giustamente poi
30.
ci sono i 3 mesi di
Then we have
bottiglia.
3 months in the bottle.
E quindi è un vino che ha una bella
So this
bella
wine
personalità.
is
È un vino che si vede,
easy to drink.
cornicia, no? È informale,
It's
un po'
informal.
l'idea,
You can drink it with
giusta
friends.
di Chianti classico,
And it's
che
the
non si
right
deve
idea of
perdere
Chianti
di,
Classico.
come dire, di approcciabilità
We shouldn't lose sight of
questo
it. We shouldn't lose its
avere quindi, no,
approachability,
potenzialità
still
di
keeping its
richiamimento di
aging
durata.
potential.
È un vino sbarazzino, io lo trovo
It's
un po' più femminile, passatemi
more
il termine, proprio per questo,
feminine.
soprattutto
Please allow me to
per
say
questa
this,
grazia che gli viene
especially
data
because it's
dal
graceful,
merlot. Ecco. È
because
un
of
po'
mellow.
la Lolita di Nabokov,
It's
però
like
nella prima
Nabokov's
parte, nella parte
Lolita,
di fatto
but in the
azione,
first
la parte
part,
di
the part of
innamoramento, la parte
falling in love,
drammatica
not the
del finale.
dramatic
Ci
ending.
spostiamo giusto al di là della
Now
Greve,
we
quindi
move on the other
attraversiamo il
side of the
Chianti
Greve
Classico,
River.
andiamo nella sponda opposta
We go to the
e
opposite
andiamo a
bank
assaggiare uno dei vini di
and
Greve.
we
Ecco,
taste one of the wines
come
of the wines of
vedete,
Greve. Greve
è uno dei comuni più grandi
is one of the
e non è
largest
meno
municipalities,
complesso in
and
termini di
it's not less
cambiamento,
complex
perché ci si sposta
in
a
terms
destra e a
of
sinistra della
changes.
Greve,
You
ma
move
soprattutto
left
ci si
and right
sposta
of the
molto
Greve
in
River,
altitudine,
but there's a difference in
quindi le
altitude,
esposizioni possono fare
and
tanta differenza,
exposures
però
make a lot of difference.
la zona di Greve è accomunata
The
da dei
area
terreni più
of Greve
argillosi,
has
sono in
more
particolare dei terreni di
clay-filled
Marna, sono
soils. It's
chiamati dei laghi
marl,
di Sillano, è una
the Sillano marl area.
delle influenze
This
geologiche
is one of the
del Chianti Classico,
typical
e le
geological
Marne sono
influences of
argillate
Chianti
e
Classico,
calcaree.
and marl
Quindi
is
ci dobbiamo
lime,
aspettare dei
limestone,
vini con
and clay.
un tannino
So
più
these wines
atmosferico,
will be more
soprattutto i vini
austere,
blu, dei vini
with more
tendenzialmente più
tannins,
scuri come
darker
il
wines
frutto
in terms of fruit,
e con più potenza.
and more powerful
L'azienda si
wines.
chiama Terreno, anche questa è una grande
Cherreno
selezione, si chiama
Winery,
A
Gran
Sofia, è
Selezione,
una dedica
a
che
Sofia.
il padre ha fatto
This is a
a Sofia Rune, che oggi è
dedication that
effettivamente
the father made to Sofia Rune, who is now
proprietaria,
the owner,
la persona che si occupa, che segue
the
l'azienda,
person who's following the winery, who's in
e
charge of
questo
the
vino la
winery.
ricorda un po' perché è una
And
ragazza bionda
this
piena di
wine is
energia
reminiscent
e
of
devo
her.
dire che
She's
riesce a trasmettere a mio
fair-haired
avviso la sua
and full of
personalità
energy,
a questo vino. Da
and
qui
her
assaggiamo
personality is
invece il
present in the wine.
100% Sangiovese.
100% Sangiovese,
Questo è un vino che fa 30 o 32 mesi
30-32
botte grande
months in,
e sono
in
vigne
vats, in large
piantate appunto sulla
barrels.
formazione di Sillano e
These
sulle Marne nel
vines
1980, quindi
were
abbiamo
planted in
da
1980
vini che possiamo
on these
considerare
Sillano
promettenti.
malls, so we can
L'azienda
call
è
them
un'azienda
old
certificata
vines.
ecologica.
This is organic, an organic winery.
Come sentite il vino è
As you can feel,
un pochino più
the wine is
roccioso, un pochino più
more rocky,
minerale,
more
smoky rispetto al
mineral.
precedente, ma
It's more
indipendentemente dal
smoky
confronto
than the previous one.
abbiamo un vino sempre con
But
un
apart
bel
from the
vino
comparison,
scuro,
it's
un
again
po'
light ruby
di
in
stile
color.
riduttivo, in particolare all'inizio, ha bisogno di un po' più di tempo nel
It
bicchiere,
needs
ma
some time in the
come
glass
dice
to get rid of
tra
some
l'altro
reduction aromas.
bisogna paura della ossidazione,
But
no?
we
Bisogna avere
should
paura
be
dell'aggressione,
afraid of
quindi anzi se si
oxidation
aspetta
and
un
not
minore
of
invecchiamento, sono contento di
reduction.
trovarlo così in un
If I
assaggio.
want
Questa è
to
una
age
vendita del
my
19,
wine,
una bella
I should be
annata
happy
e
to have this type
l'ultimo
of wine.
uscito.
2019.
Ci sono
This
queste
is the
note
most
di
recent release.
brace,
We have
floreali di
these
nuovo, di
notes of
rosa, acqua di
ashes,
rosa.
flowers, rose
Il frutto
water.
rosso è anche più fresco, c'è un
The red
po'
fruit is fresher.
come si chiama il
We
melograno,
have a
non
pomegranate,
solo la ciliegia, anzi la
not only
ciliegia anche in
cherry,
bocca sentite rimane un po'
and
questa
also on the
sensazione
palate
più del
you
nocciolo,
have
no? Quando si mangia la
this
ciliegia si
feeling
rimane
of
a giocare col
the
nocciolo in
cherry
bocca,
stone
lascia
when
questo gusto,
after
però
eating
con
the
un
cherry you
zucchero
play with the
molto
stone.
ben definito,
But the
netto, il
taste
vino è
is very
secco,
well defined,
pieno
clear.
e
The
il
wine is
tanino,
dry,
come
full-bodied,
dicevamo, lo troviamo
and
più gessoso.
tannins are more chalky. It's ripe, it's not bitter or rough, but we have a chalky texture and an austere finish, acidity, and it's quite with quite a long finish. This wine needs time to discover. It's a more dramatic wine. You need to experience the tension on the palate before you get and grasp all its depths and all the different facets. An element that we will always find in these wines is this savory feeling. It's a savory wine which leaves us with a savory finish.
So we remain on the same part of the Greve River, and we get to San Casciano, Greve, Panzano, and maybe also Lamole. And we come to Montefiorale. Montefiorale is a very tiny village where, in order to understand the terroir, you have just to enter the village, because the village is entirely built on stone, white stone. And definitely many of you remember or know the facades of the churches in Borgogna or in Paris, so with this white lime present in Burgundy, and at Montefiorale we have the same thing. So already from how the village has been built, you understand what's below. Alberese is limestone. So what characteristics do we have here? Limestone versus clay. So in clay, you may keep your feet in a soaked sock. But instead, limestone is just like the chalk that the gips that you would receive if you had a broken arm. So therefore, it does not absorb it too much. So therefore, it gives a great elegance to the wines and great personality to the wine variety. And this is what we find here. And especially we find this in the Gaiole area, and it's also scattered in various areas. But Montefiorale is a very small part on limestone, and this limestone brings about wines with a very elegant fragrance and finish of tannin and savory taste that in Sangiovese may be a little bit more aggressive, especially when the wine is young. So this is Vina Calcinaia, the winery of Conti Capponi, and very old winery. And this wine is called Villa Vastignano. And what I would like to say something more with regard to this, because Vina Vastignano represents one of the main elements of Chianti Classico. We are in a region where wine growing is an ancient activity, and where the families have developed a very deep knowledge about the territory. The Count Sebastiano Capponi planted in 1994 a new vine variety with the Sangiovese clones because he thought these were the most qualitative at Alberello. And at Alberello is very rare in Tuscany. It almost rarely existed, and it was abandoned for the Guyot cultivation, wine growing, etc. But in 1994, so before the years of 97, 2000, and 2003, he understood that there was something changing. So he decided to plant an Alberello vine variety to refresh Sangiovese and protect the grapes more from sun irradiation and giving more shade. And he ended up by having one of the most important vine varieties producing a great wine. So, and this is also linked to the terroir. And at Montefiorale, as you will see also in La Mole, so the vineyards are terraced, and because of the altitude, type of soil, type of terroir, and the shape of the hills. This, as you can see, this is a very floral wine. We have a violet, rose, and this is also restrained, meaning it's restrained. It's less obvious at first in the expression of fruits. And then we recognize cherry, vibrant cherry, but we also have a sensation of red-orange, more savory or deeper. And in the mouth, we still recognize fruits, and we have a concentration of dry wine, very large on the palate, and tannin is steady, velvety, and important. And the savory part follows the balance of this wine, giving a balance. So this is a 15-degree wine in terms of alcohol content, and therefore we understand that this is exposed the southwest, and this is Alberello. This is the right side of the Greve River. And the concentration is very important, especially for the year 2018, because it's a lighter year. And I find this wine very sophisticated, not very easy approach. And this wine can be hybrid in terms of a hybrid vehicle. You can drink it very easily because of this balance that it features. So the electric part that is smooth, but at the same time, this is a wine that can age over time well. And secondly, if we analyze it well, it presents a very good stratification between taste, spices, and grace. So in the Greve municipality, well, actually, we go up to La Mole. From Greve to La Mole. La Mole is the smallest additional geographical unit, but it was limiting this UGA because it features very unique characteristics. So we are on the eastern part of the denomination, and together with Radda and Gaiole, we see that this eastern part of the Chianti Classico area is occupied by the Macigno, the Chianti mountain. And this is located exactly in this region. Lamole is one of the highest areas in terms of altitude, and therefore wines are even more floral, fresher, and maybe lighter, so there's a reduction in the alcohol volume, and it gains grace. And here Vigna Rospoli starts from 600 meter of altitude, starting from there upwards. So this is the maximum limit of the denomination, which is 700 meters. So the denomination ends at 700 meters of altitude. So Macigno is a mountain composed of arenary sand and sandstone. So it contains sand, but it's not sand. This is not stone, and instead sand is draining and loose. So this is 2015 I was talking about, and so let's go back in time. It's not by chance that 2015, well, we have this Lamole wine, because Lamole winemakers tended to bring their wines later because of this particularly savory taste. So this wine is organic by the Lamole wine grower. Well, first of all, we can experience the complexity of a more aged wine. So we have cherry, red fruits, blackberry, tobacco, leather, fleshy notes, but still, even if not really fresh, we recognize violet and iris, and this is the very typical characteristic of Lamole. So, in the mouth, it's rich with this floral note. The wine is full-bodied, dry. And, well, dry, this is a term that we had in the description of wines, so there was a dry. For Chianti Classico, in my opinion, dry is a very important term, because this is a part of the identity of this wine, exactly because of the snap you have in the mouth when you drink it, this acid tannic taste of the wine in the mouth. And the acidity is very important, stingy, and it remains until the end. And in the end, the wine remains dry. So this is a wine. So the Lamole fascination is the fact that we have these wines that bring together grace and power, because this wine is a postmodern wine with a type of, with a super traditional vinification method, with the funky notes, but we still have the elegance of the zone, of the area. So we can think of the tension of a ballet, but it's more Roberto Bolle than Carla Fracci. So we have a materic part, which is important. And I believe that also, despite these imperfections, we have the full personality of this wine. And in order to understand it better, Lamole can also be considered a more precise area, somewhat more precious. So, do you have questions?
Ci spostiamo di
Okay,
poco
let's
e
move
restiamo a
forward,
Colgareto,
but still let's remain in the Greve municipality because Panzano is a small village of the Greve
Una volta
municipality.
si diceva
So in the
che,
past, it was said that
che i Panzano fossero
Panzano
i Margaux
wines
del Chianti
were the
Classico
Margaux of Chianti
per il
Classico
profumo,
for the fragrance, for the opulence, for the grace they feature. And this is an expression, even if I don't like comparisons with France, but within Chianti Classico, I believe this is a summary that I can use because the comparison is fits very well the idea. So here we are still on the Chianti Macino mountain, and specifically the Le Cinciole company is on the Sillano hills on the Marne we found in Greve, and here we have
chiamato un po' semplificando da noi il calestro, cioè
so here we have shale. So we have these pressed shale, and if you look at them, if you touch them, they look like stone. Then you break them, and they are very fragile, and they are not real stones, but these are pressed shale, and therefore this allows the vine variety to keep humidity, and at the same time, they are they penetrate the roots of the plants.
c'è un colore, se ci fate caso,
Then we have
leggermente più,
a
c'è un
color
colore appena più scuro e
which is
concentrato rispetto
darker, more concentrated than the previous wines.
non so se sentite, se avete anche voi questa
I do not know if you
queste note
share the same feeling,
questo
these pepper notes, floral notes,
in stile Margaux che troviamo
Margot style,
e un frutto scuro
and dark fruit,
si va
which is clearer.
siamo sempre sulla ciliegia, ma siamo sulla ciliegia di
Cherry, black cherry, ripe cherry.
il cassis, i frutti neri.
We are going towards cassis and black fruits. So we have black fruit, pepper, tobacco, and this violet, clear violet or floral note.
Vino secco, pieno,
It's a dry wine, it's full-bodied, 15 degrees of alcohol, 2018,
acidità croccante,
a crisp acidity,
vigna campo ai peri,
Vigna Campo ai Peri,
gran selezione,
where this Gran Selezione come from, is at 440 meters of altitude. So again, it's rather high.
tannino, sentite un tannino
And
deciso,
tannins are strong, wide, thick.
lo spessore
We feel the clay. The thickness of the tannin is higher,
c'è una bella sensazione vellutata.
but we have a velvety feeling.
La vendemmia,
And despite the vintage, which is 2018,
nonostante questa acidità,
and despite the crisp acidity, which underlines the tannins,
un vino molto classico
I think this is a very classic wine for the denomination and
della zona di Panzano.
very classic for the Panzano area.
Pantaloni grigi e giacca blu, ecco, lo puoi mettere in
It's
qualsiasi
like
situazione,
gray trousers and a blue jacket. You can wear it anytime, and it always keeps you in style. It's versatile
di grandissimo equilibrio. È un
and
vino,
it's
tra
very,
l'altro,
very well balanced.
anche in questo caso certificato biologico.
Also, this wine is organic.
La zona di Panzano,
The Panzano area, I would like to add,
percentuale a sproposito,
well,
magari qualcuno mi può
maybe
correggere,
I
ma
make a
Panzano
mistake,
è
but I think Panzano
delle UGA del Chianti Classico
is one of the Chianti Classico UGAs, which is nearly 100% organic. I think most wineries are 70-80% organic. Needless to say, this is further evidence of this perfect microclimate which enables winemakers to go organic. Now let's move south, the province of Siena. So generally speaking, sunnier, warmer areas. And let's move to Radda. Radda in the past was considered as a more difficult area because its climate was fresher because of the altitude, and now it's back in fashion because its wines are pretty fresh. This is Vigna Il Corno, 400 meters above sea level, southern exposures, vines 25 years of age. And again, this is the Sillano rocks, so clay and limestone. Vigna Il Corno, if you know the area, is one of the first vineyards that you see on the right-hand side on the road towards Castello di Volpaia. Again, this is 2016, so a great vintage but an older wine, leather, ripe cherry, some jam fruit like a cherry jelly, tobacco note. And we can feel a typical note of aged Sangiovese, which is potpourri, so dried flowers. It's full-bodied, it's very savory, slightly thinner on the palate, but with a very fine mesh, with mature chalkiness of the tannins, but it's still austere. Despite the fact it's 2016, I would say it's super young. It's like a teenager, despite the complexity of its perfumes, which is typical of Radda. On the palate, it is still very fresh and young. Let's move from Radda to Gaiole, which is another of the most representative municipalities, and we move to Castello di Broglio, one of the symbols of this denomination and part of the history of Chianti Classico. The Marquis of the Castle of Barone Ricasoli, who contributed to the unification of Italy, one of the first presidents of the council and one of the founders of Chianti Classico. Gaiole is on the Macigno mountain, on the range that separates Chianti Classico from Valdarno. And there's a mix between limestone, east and west of the castle, and part of clays and shales. 2019, the harvest between 23rd of September and October 11th. This is the classic harvest. This year, the harvest has already finished. So, and 23 months in tonneau, 30% of which are new. On the nose, we feel the delicacy of Gaiole. Shale and altitude characterize Gaiole. Limestone soils and altitude. So the result is more fruity, red fruits and fresher Chianti Classico. I think this is around 300 meters of altitude, maybe even higher. The Gaiole area is very complex in terms of altitude. The area of San Giusto Rentengano is lower, below 100 meters of altitude, whereas moving towards Castello di Broglio we get to 400 meters and even above. I can say 300-400 here because this Gran Selezione is a blend from different vineyards from Barone Ricasoli. They make further 3 different Gran Selezioni, one from limestone, one from sandier areas, and one from clay areas. So it's very interesting to try and get the differences in the denomination and within this UGA. So again, delicate cherry stone, rose floral note, and toasted oak, which is very well integrated and very graceful. The tannins are lighter, more mature, not really aggressive. What impresses in this wine is the long and fruity acidity, which underlines the fruity red feature of this wine. It's an elegant acidity. It's like sailing elegantly with the headwinds, with a very, very clear interpretation of the vineyard and of the territory. It's very clean and very fruity. And now, let's move in terms of style. Castelnuovo Berardenga, orange, is the southernmost area of Chianti Classico. We are bordering with the Macigno range of the Chianti Mountains, but we move west, so we go further away, and the soil is rich in clay and also rich in silt. Wines will be darker and more powerful because temperatures are higher, the altitude is lower, and because of these more powerful soils. It is said that Chianti Classico from Castelnuovo di Berardenga is more similar to Brunello. Because if we are opposite the northern slope of Montalcino. This is Carpineta Fontalpino, another organic winery. And this is Vigna Dofana. The nose is very intense, fruity, darker We feel
Però prevale una sensazione di
the
buccia d'arancia, una
blackberry,
sensazione di brandy.
cassis, and orange peel,
E poi
very
anche un
vibrant, very
grano.
fresh, and also Mediterranean bush.
Sentite queste note di
You
mate
can feel
mediterraneo,
the Mediterranean bush notes,
molto intenso. E
very
sentite anche una
intense.
bocca più austera.
And we also
Questo
have
vino è ancora
a
secco, è
more
pieno.
austere
Non
palate,
sono riuscito a
very
recuperare
dry,
il
full-bodied.
dato alcolico, ma credo che saremo sui
I
14,5,
don't know
forse
about
arriviamo
the
a 15.
alcohol level, but I think it's
Il
14.5,
tanninetto è
15
potente,
degrees.
sentite,
Tannins are
masticabile,
powerful. You can chew
ha la
them.
grana più
Their
larga,
texture is
l'acidità è
bigger,
rinfrescante, non è
refreshing acidity,
così aggressiva o
not so
intensa.
aggressive, not so intense.
Siamo a 320 metri di altitudine,
320 meters of
è un vino
altitude.
che invecchia in parte in
This
barrique
wine
con un flusso
ages
naturalmente
in
integrale
oak,
per
in small
questo
barrels of oak,
tannino
to
così potente.
integrate those
Ed
powerful
effettivamente
tannins,
brunelleggia un po', se
and it's
possiamo
rather
dirlo
similar to a Brunello
rispetto ai suoi vicini.
compared to the other
C'è un
wines.
vino come una cottura alla brace, c'è un vino
This wine
immediato,
is
un
like
vino
barbecue cooking.
virile,
It's
heavy
immediate,
metal in qualche
it's
maniera
heavy metal,
all'interno
it's
della
masculine
denominazione.
within the
E
denomination, of
nonostante
course.
ciò è
And
fatto
despite
da
this,
un'enologa, questo per
this
dire
was made
un'enologa,
by
produttrice,
a
agronoma,
female
anzi dirò così,
winemaker,
una
an
produttrice di vino,
agronomist.
un'ottima
She's an excellent
Ci
agronomist.
spostiamo in questo caso di poco a Vagliagli, che fa
So let's
sempre
go to
parte di
Vagliagli, still part
Castelnuovo
of the Castelnuovo Beradega municipality.
Il comune di Castelnuovo
And the
Beradega, per
municipality of
grandi
Castelnuovo
proporzioni,
Beradega is one of the largest in Tuscany in
e
terms of
andiamo a Borgo
size.
Scopeto, dove c'è
And we go to Borgo Scopeto, where we also have a very beautiful
l'azienda della famiglia
relay resort. This is a descendant from the Angelini family. And
Francia, il comando dell'azienda c'è Alessandra,
Alessandra is
e
managing the winery.
questo è un altro
And
100%
this is
sangiovese.
another 100% Sangiovese. We go back to 2016 as a year.
La
And
particolarità di Borgo
the
Scopeto è
peculiarity of Borgo Scopeto is the fact that,
di questo vino è di
and
essere
this wine,
una
is the
sorta di
fact that
piccolo
this is
parco
like on top of a hill.
alle Marne di Sillano,
And in addition to Marne di Sillano, so clay and limestone,
c'è una
we
parte
also have
di macedonia vegetale.
the
Per
rock
quanto
in
riguarda
the
la
terroir.
biodiversità,
So with regard to
sostanzialmente
biodiversity, we have this winery covers 503 hectares and only 70 are cultivated with
30 litri di
vines.
legno,
So 30 months of wood
100.
and 10 hectoliter barrels.
Anche qui si sente molto
Also here you can feel the first evolution of tobacco licorice with a light sensation of leafy, for example.
una bella ciliegia nera matura,
Black cherry,
bocca tanto tabacco, tanto
tobacco, underwood in the
È un vino
taste.
pieno,
This is a full-bodied wine, but less generous compared to the previous ones. The alcohol content is 13.5, so old style, very beautiful is this style, which is more balanced, perfect for steaks, because you know that we add black pepper on the steak, and therefore if you add salt, this is a completely different thing. So Chianti Classico is perfect with steaks because of its acidity, tannins, and it's more moderate compared to others. And in the mouth, you feel that the acidity is gentler, softer, and in the mouth we feel density, thickness, and a velvety tannin. And of course, we feel also something rough in the end, but I find it very classical. It's like a vintage car. It's not like a modern car. You turn on the engine and you go. You have to take care of it. You have to wait for it. You have to take care of it and approach it in a. You have to use gentle manners. So let's remain in the province of Siena, and we move to another municipality. A question from the audience. Yes. Unfortunately, the interpreters cannot translate the questions because they are not spoken into the mic. So, good question. I believe everybody listened. Okay. The interpreters not, but. So let me answer your question as a journalist and not as a person who was born in Florence. So what is happening in the Chianti Classico area, which is beautiful, is the fact that there is a community of intent to explore the territory. So this is a historic area, and this means that various steps of wine growing have been covered. So using oak barrels and adding Merlot, all these are historic steps that in Chianti Classico have already been absorbed. And so today there is a new intention to explore the territory, because this territory has such a strong personality that even if the wine grower wants to do something else, in any case, this becomes always clear, the super task. So therefore, it's clear that this comes from that territory. So the companies, even before the Gran Selezione, were already going towards the direction of 100% Sangiovese, using more and more the large barrel, doing right maceration for Sangiovese, and not the
Quindi si sta facendo tutto per andare a cercare di esprimere il territorio, ed ecco perché ci sono anche dei salti importanti tra un bicchiere e l'altro. Cioè il vero è che rimaniamo nello stile chianticlassico.
So the Chianti Classico area style is there, but we still feel the differences, because between Castelnuovo Berardenga and Lamole there is a huge difference. because these can be considered two extremes, and this is why I mentioned them. But well enough, this is good like this. And for example, if you consider Bordeaux, the differences in the terroir and the climate are less marked than what we find in the Chianti Classico area, which is more complex. So Bordeaux is on the same altitude, but between Saint-Estèphe and Margaux, there is a huge difference, or even more between Pessac and Pomerol. In my opinion, this is the direction. I mean, I don't think there is no idea of clear marketing orientation. Maybe other denominations are doing this with the sugar content, and this is not happening. Okay, let's go to Castellina. So we are still in Siena, in the province of Siena, but we are southwest. And since this is a large municipality, this is an area where the altitude plays a major role and helps us identify the terroir, because the highest part comes to 600 meters of altitude. So, for example, Contenuto is one of the largest wineries. And then going down to Castellina Scalo, we have terroirs which at the beginning could be maybe more, may have more limestone, and then at Castellino Scalo, direction highway, we have more sandy terroir. At Rocca de Machie, we have halfway, so mid-hills. So this is Sergio Zingarelli, one of the flagship wines of the winery. And technically, we are on the lake. And on the lake and the sand. So sand means draining terroir, immediate fruits, and easy wine without reducing its value. So this wine comes with these red fruits. The cherry accompanies it with the pomegranate white pepper, and in the mouth we have cherry nuts and red currant. And so this is a very distinctive element of Chianti Classico Sangiovese. It's a full-bodied wine, and tannin is lighter, subtler, and still with that chalky, slightly chalky texture, powdery, but with a lighter tannin in the end. And I believe this is an easier wine, more approachable, and I say this with great respect. I don't want to make it banal. It's like Renaissance art. You look at it and you say, wow, you don't need any explanation. You don't need what the artist was thinking, like in contemporary art. You don't need explanation like in sacred art. Immediately you look at it and you appreciate it. And you drink this wine also, not only during the meals, but also outside meals. And out of the ones we have tasted, this is a wine which not necessarily you will drink it in combination with food or other things. Last but not least,
we go back towards the center of Tuscany, San Donato in Poggio, again a very complex municipality, because it has a complex history various municipalities have joined,
in particolare
and
all'interno
in
del
particular
comune di Barberino Valdelsa, l'Elsa insieme alla Greve è uno dei comuni che è
in
uno dei più
Barberino
importanti
Valdelsa.
del territorio del Chianti Classico.
Elsa is one of the rivers that define Chianti Classico.
Qui la
And again, this is 100% Sangiovese.
abbiamo un altro è di essere sì
These soils
su base alberese, quindi
are
calcarea,
based on shale,
troviamo anche uno dei suoli
or
diffusi nel Chianti
maybe
Classico,
one of
non
the
tantissimo per quanto riguarda le vigne, perché parliamo di
soils
pietraforte,
in Chianti
quindi
Classico.
un suolo praticamente roccioso sul quale non è
And we
facilissimo
talk about
piantare,
a
fare
rocky soil,
dietro, che però è un po' caratterizzante della mineralità dei vini di San Donato in Poggio. C'era forse un'altra domanda?
and we have the typical feature of San Giovanni in Poggio. It's pietraforte,
In genere questo tipo di suolo è molto diffuso
and this type of soil
soprattutto nelle parti
is
più
very
alte
much
dei boschi,
widespread and
proprio
present in
perché
Chianti
non è
Classico.
facile far attecchire la vite su questo tipo di
It's not easy
Infatti
to
qui
have
c'è
vines on this type of soil.
di alberese
So we have alberese, so shale.
Sì, in realtà qui a Ormagni siamo
Well, here in Ormagni it's lower, 400. 400 meters is the altitude, is perfection in terms of altitude for Sangiovese. It's the ideal altitude for Sangiovese.
Torniamo sul 2018, ecco,
2018,
al naso colpisce in particolare la freschezza.
on the nose we have a very fresh wine, fresh fruit,
La violetta fresca, l'iris,
fresh violet, iris,
il bosco,
strawberry, pepper.
un vino pieno, secco,
It's a full-bodied, it's dry,
teso in bocca, un tannino
it's
croccante, masticato,
clean and clear,
un pochino più austero,
crunchy, chewy tonguing, very austere, very young, very fragrant. It's easy to chew, it's very reactive, very lively. The finish is clean,
questo carattere molto molto fresco.
but it remains very fresh.
Mi fa venire in mente una cosa di quale si parla oggi, cioè
Well, yesterday we talked about subtractive wines. Well, subtracting means taking away things. While this is okay when we go against the wines of the 1990s, this is okay. This is a good example of subtraction wine. It's a crunchy, crisp, fragrant wine, typical of Chianti Classico, very savory. It's perfect to match with food, and it's also fun. It's like an ironic wine, like a Rigoletto. You drink it with no problems, having fun, in a light-hearted mood. But we never focus enough on the freshness of the fruit when we talk about the potential aging. In order to age, a great wine must have tannin, acidity, balance, and fresh fruit. Otherwise, the fruit becomes... and when you start from fresh fruit, you have great potential for aging, which is another element to consider in terms of Chianti Classico. Often, when we have vertical tasting sessions of Chianti Classico, you have incredible discoveries. Sometimes we think about wines with potential aging, but Chianti Classico, especially in these versions with 100% Sangiovese, large vats, with this new balance, can really have huge aging potential. We apologize, but it's impossible to translate for the ladies not using the microphone. Well, there are very many things that have to do with altitude. The higher you go, the more sun you get, the thicker the skins become. And for grapes like Sangiovese and Nebbiolo, this is fantastic because you get more color and more tannins, more polyphenols as well. So this is positive. The further down you go, the more you have a ready wine, more fruit. But you lose these features. 400 meters are the right balance between structure and fruit. And it yields the best of the best. I've summarized very quickly, but yeah, it was a common question we wanted to ask. Any more questions? Well, I'm not really prepared on that, but I would say that there are no huge differences in terms of price between these wines. We don't have a bottle of 200 euros and a bottle of 20 euros here. I would say that we are from 20, 25 euros to 45, 50 euros, I would say. I'm guessing a little bit, but last question. This is another good question. Based on my personal experience, I can say that the more continental element, so the higher acidity and the fresh fruit of Chianti Classico, often proved to age better than Brunello di Montalcino, despite its less structure. But also Brunello di Montalcino is not always the same wine. The higher areas have more aging potential. Some lower areas have less potential. Thank you very much. Perché se non finiscono mai non si riesce. Lo so, anch'io. Sì, anch'io, esatto. E la collega anche lei, per quello che doveva andare su. Allora, senti, adesso mi